And then that kind of, one of the things I hadn't really figured out, because nobody explains this, is do you want to, it's kind of a level of bullshit you kind of know already, you know what I mean? Like,
and it's like, yeah, and then you just, put that other bullet right between their eyes, and then they're dead. Okay, what's for lunch?
You want to shoot people in the nose.
Hey, Stu, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. So, what part of the world are you joining us today?
Oxford, in England, so like an hour from London, basically.
Okay, cool. That's exciting. What's your current title and role right now?
I work remotely for a company in Serbia, of all places, and the Serbian games industry is pretty small, so they struggle to get senior people. So they've hired a bunch of us remotely. I think we've got people all over the world now. Right. And so officially my job title is like senior designer, but because it's such a small, flat company, basically sort of managing the design department, personal reviews, mentoring, and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting work. And traveling over to Serbia, I hadn't really experienced that sort of area of the world. It's been interesting, learned a lot.
Yeah, I can't say I've been there. And the company's called Two Desperados?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they've been going a little while. They do mobile free-to-play games, and They have a bunch that are doing well. They got another one in soft launch, and so as I say, they just kind of want to kind of level up, basically get a bit more professional and hire people like me to help them avoid the same old mistakes that we made, so they can make new exciting mistakes.
Right. Let's find some veterans who have learned, who have the battle scars to prevent us from doing the same shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That's smart. So, how did you get involved in the industry?
So I've been doing this 28 years now, which is a long time ago now. There were no games courses or anything at universities back then. I was working at a cyber cafe. I saw an advert for a company called Bullfrog.
Bullfrog. Populous, all that stuff?
Exactly. And you could just go there for basically a couple of weeks and play their games and write bug reports. And so I took some holiday and I did that, and I was like, okay, I want to do this for a living. So I made a bunch of levels for Quake, and I sent those to Psygnosis, and that was my kind of portfolio, basically.
Wow.
And so I joined, they just finished G-Police 1, and I worked on the sequel, which was a cool game, but it came out just as Sony was closing Psygnosis down, so nobody's ever heard of it. It didn't do well.
Okay, what was the game, though? I missed it.
It was called G-Police Weapons of Justice. A great title. As I say, we were south of England. They had studios, Psygnosis, all over the place. We shipped that game just as they were closing it, so nobody ever played it. So.
I've got those in my video game graveyard of games that never came out. And then where'd you go after that?
When it died, half of the studio went off and formed Acclaim Cheltenham, and the other half we went to Bristol and we worked on a flight sim called B-17-2, which was a sequel to an old flight sim that Microprose did. And that was cool. You ordered the crew around. I remember that was a good fun time. And then we spent quite a good couple of years working on a first-person shooter with Andy McNabb for the Xbox. But the publisher that was paying us died, and that killed the entire studio. And so then I joined Acclaim Cheltenham. It was a kind of a circular thing, basically.
Right.
So yeah, I've had this weird thing where over the years, the same guy has been my boss like 4 times over 28 years. 4 different studios. It's crazy.
4? Wow.
Yeah. Acclaim Cheltenham, and then a company called Blitz, who did a load of SpongeBob's and lots of licensed stuff, lots of Microsoft Connect things, which was interesting. And we worked on Epic Mickey 2 and a whole bunch of stuff, mostly licensed.
Wait. Epic Mickey 2 from...
so Junction Point in America made that game. But I
know, I know all about Junction Point, yes.
Okay, right. So they hired us to do the PS3, Xbox 360 and PC versions, and we made the boss battles of the game as well. So, it was fun working. Got to meet Warren Spector and stuff.
So Blitz did a lot of like licensed IP, right? And work
Yeah.
for hire, that kind of stuff. So
That's right. Yeah, that was their thing. And then, yeah, just a whole bunch of companies, mostly with THQ and such, which is what killed that studio eventually. When THQ died, they lost a lot of their business. And so,
right.
yeah. And then a company called Exient, we did Angry Birds, Transformers, and a whole bunch of mobile free-to-play games, basically.
Okay.
They were making a whole bunch of people redundant, and so 10 of us got together and we said we're going to make our own studio and set up well-play games at that point. Because, we between us, we thought we had the skills, the contacts and such like. And so, yeah, we set that up.
Cool.
And 10 co-founders that caused the lawyers some issues because normally it's like one person in charge, but there were 10 of us. It was good.
What do you wish you had known about the industry back when you got started?
I mean, there's various. I mean, you learn some painful lessons over the years,
Right.
But I think for me the main thing was like when you're making a game, it's always the most important game. It's the make or break game, and everything is critical and urgent. But actually, there's always another game. I think that kind of the team is everything, and understanding. I think I would have been better learning like soft skills, like communication skills, being able to talk and listen. Because if you can't give feedback and you can't take feedback, or you can't get people to understand your ideas, it doesn't really matter anything else. It doesn't really matter. You're
right.
Unless you're going to work on your own, you're always in a team. And so being able to work with a team, I think that was the one lesson that it took me a while to learn.
I hear that a lot, and that's something people don't think about, right? They're always like, oh, I got to learn this engine or I got to do this. But it's like, yeah, there's all those people skills, and those things are, just as important, depending on the role, even more important, right?
Yeah, you fixate on your current game, but it's like, after this game, there'll be another game. So you need to build your team and your reputation and all that. Yeah, the soft skills, basically. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and the team's a big thing too, right? You can't just throw a bunch of people in a room and expect genius, right? Like there's relationships that build, and you have situations, and you build trust, and you break trust, and you rebuild it, and all that kind of stuff to be a functioning team.
The
people don't think
publishers
about.
That are hiring and firing and then hiring again. That's just really short-sighted, basically.
Yeah, that's really dumb. Yeah.
Like you say, you have to trust your people. You have to know you can do that work, or actually you're going to struggle with that work. You're going to need some help. You just don't have that on a new team.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and build up that rapport and just be able to have conversations and be honest and figure things out.
It's interesting.
Your way through it all the time.
Tribalism, we found, was a real issue of if I know you and you make a mistake, oh, that's unlucky. But if I don't know you and you make a mistake, you're an idiot. And so you've got to have that communication and trust, like you say, and that's really hard online as well. That's the hardest bit, I think, for working remotely for a company 1,000 miles away, is that building that team rapport, basically.
Yeah, and that's a whole new world, right? And like, I've been in the industry for almost 35 years, and for so much of it, it has been the people part of it in person, and then like, how do you do it? Not just remote, but remote strangers, right? And trying to figure that out. So it's a different skill set, and there are different challenges. Yeah,
I can imagine, because we were used to working in a studio, and then COVID changed all of that.
Right.
But it'd be interesting for the people that are just starting now, and this is how you do it. I'm curious about what that's like. How they build their teams.
Yeah, it was funny. Like, and some people take it to the extreme, because I remember interviewing a candidate once, and he'd been at a company for 2 years, never met anyone. Understandable, people are spread out, but like, they'd never done even anything with video. So like they never even saw, like, they didn't even know like anything about any, you know what I mean? And they didn't, because you can establish some level of rapport just from like looking at a camera and talking and stuff. And I'm like, what is it, like spy agency? It just seems bizarre to like 2 years and like never see any other person and just be in chat only for 2 years working on a game. And I'm like, and having no idea who any of those other people are. I'm like, that's just weird.
I mean, I've worked with people who would definitely prefer that. They'd love that to be the thing. Like,
right.
Communication is painful and slow for people, but no, I think it's really important. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So here we are in 2025, all this craziness going on. Like, what kind of advice would you give someone looking to get their first job now in this world we're in now with everything?
Well, yeah, I mean, ironically, that's I have just written a book about exactly that.
Tell me, yeah.
Like, you've been doing it a while, you learn a bunch of things, and you just think, well, if somebody had told me that, it would have made my life easier. So that's kind of what I was trying to put in. And but it really kind of comes down to what you want to do, because when we talk about the games industry, you know, that's extremely wide. Like, do you want to work on your own? In which case, there's never been a better time to make games. Go for it. The challenge is making money from games. That's a whole different thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then there's joining small indie teams, or then there's joining big studios. And for me, the kind of advice has always been, the smaller the studio you want to join, the more you should make yourself T-shaped. You know, you have your specialization, but you need to be able to do other stuff.
Right.
Whereas if you're going to join a big studio, they're just looking for specialists generally. You know, they want you to be passionate about one thing, and they don't need you to be able to do a bunch of stuff, because they have people to do the other stuff. Yeah. And then, I mean, obviously I'm biased because that's how I got into the industry, but for me and people I've talked to, it's just make stuff. There are so many candidates, so many courses now. It's really hard to stand out, and so you've got to be able to say, I made this. And then kind of just as important really is not only I made this, but I can talk about this. I can tell you why I made these decisions. I can actually think about a game and break it down. And even if the game is bad, what did I learn and what will I do better? You know, that sort of stuff. I used to do because we were trying to help as a company, help other people get into the industry, we used to do a presentation on getting into games. And one slide was just massive, and it just said, finish it. Because there's so many people go, I made half a game, or I made half of this, and I did this, but then I never finished it. You're like, I don't want to hire someone who can't finish. That's the end of making a game is boring and difficult and stressful. But you need to be able to finish it, basically.
Yeah, right. It's one thing to get the plane in the air. It's another thing to land the damn thing, right? And,
exactly,
I think, quote, Glenn Ross, coffee's for closers, right? Like, you finish something, right? Even if it's not great, but it just shows that you can see something through. And I 1,000% agree. Like, everyone should have a link to something in their resume for something that they've done or they're working on. You know, I see entry-level resumes, and there's no links, there's no nothing. And I'm like, how do we know? How do you know you can do anything, right?
Exactly.
You know, and that just shows the bare minimum, and the bare minimum is just not enough. This market's just too crowded and challenging.
Like I say, you don't even have to. It doesn't have to be good. You just have to be able to show that you're learning and can articulate. I did this wrong, and then I did this wrong. You're like, okay, cool.
Right.
Rather than I made a game, and you're like, is it?
Talk through what you learned and how you changed course and how you got better, right? Like, because that shows, okay, this person has skills, they can figure things out, they can redo things and learn from it.
Yeah, exactly.
But what's the name of your book that's coming out?
Well, ironically, it's just called Designing Video Games, because the publisher said, what's the book about? And I said, designing video games. They went, okay, done. So it's like, okay, wow, I was expecting.
We're not going to focus test it and hire a company. It's like, done.
And they said, can you give more details? And I said, well, it's a step-by-step guide to making great games. And now that's on the cover. And you're like, okay, I was expecting a process, but this is apparently the process.
It comes out in April, right? You said?
End of May.
End of May, okay.
Apparently it's on a ship right now. And one of because going back to your question about what do I wish I'd learned, that was one of the things I just asked a whole bunch of people that I knew and said, what did you wish you'd known? And tried to put that in there, basically, because interestingly, that crunch came up a lot. So that was,
right. Yeah, crunch has gotten better, but I have my battle scars, as you, I'm sure you do too. Especially if you're working for a company that does licensed IP and work for hire, right? That's just puts you through the grinder. They don't give a shit. Like those publishers are just like, get it done.
Yeah, it was interesting because it exposed me, to the iron triangle. I assume you've seen that concept. Time, money, quality.
Right.
And at Blitz, they were never late. The game would always be out on time because it was licensed. It had to be. And they would never spend more than they'd been given. And so if the game was good or the game was bad, that was the bit that was out of your control, basically. So, yeah, it was a very business-like way of running it. Whether the game was good, you did your best, but that was kind of...
Well, and that's not unique to them. I can think of a couple that I won't say here that are like that too, right? Like it's all about hitting the deadline, right? Like, it's tied to a movie license or a TV series or whatever. It has to hit the date. They don't. Quality is kind of an afterthought for a lot of times. So So then what do? You take this much work and then you compress it into this much time. What about somebody mid-career right now? They're trying to advance their career. Wow, this is weird. Like I'm remote or I'm back in the office. Like just generally speaking, like what advice do you have for people trying to advance who have been in for a little bit?
Interesting question, because when we talked about like indie small studios and big studios, I don't tend to see people stay at one. That's, you kind of, you learn from one and then you go to the other and then you get burned out there and you learn from it and then you go back to the So that sort of thing can work. That kind of just always be learning, always trying to be advancing.
Yeah, because sometimes you're like, I'm so sick of having to do everything. I just want to be able to focus on this. So you go to a big studio and then it's like, wow, maybe that's boring then because you're just modeling hair, right? Like whatever for the character or something. And it's just like, I want that variety. So it's like you go back and forth. What
exactly,
you want to do.
Yeah. And then that kind of, one of the things I hadn't really figured out because nobody explains this is, do you want to kind of go in a management direction or do you want to go in a kind of principal direction? As in, I've seen so many people that are good at their job and they get promoted high enough that they're no longer doing their job. They're managing people that are doing their job. And you might not actually be a good manager. That might not be what you wanted to do with yours. So
Totally, completely. Yeah. Well, if you're good at engineering, you should be good at managing engineers. Maybe not, right? But they could be a horrible manager, right? And I think that's such an understated issue. And I think companies have gotten better about that, individual contributor track, management track. And, sometimes there's a combo. But just generally, like, if you just want to be the most amazing designer or artist or whatever and not manage people, then just focus on that and let people do that without feeling if they want to get promoted and make more money and grow, they have to be forced into that management track. Because I have seen so many people who were good at something, but they were just horrible at managing people, but they were pushed into it and it just created misery and pain. And
then they get burned out as well because
then they get burned out and they're not happy and no one around them is happy and it's just lose, right? Like, so. Yeah.
But like you say, you need the company to be able to go, well, that's fine, but you could still advance your career outside of management. Because if there's nowhere to go, that's when people get bored or burned out or quit or whatever. Yeah.
Hey, if you're finding this interesting, please click the like and subscribe button so the YouTube algorithms know and I can help spread the show. Thanks.
So I'm curious about the topic of change. When did you realize it was time to leave Well Played Games, which you had been in it for 8.5 years and building, and join this small company in Serbia with Two Desperados in another country? I mean, that's change. That's big change.
I mean, on a certain level, it's ridiculous to do that. I mean, I have to do some soul searching, but basically, we'd set up Well Played. And we didn't have any investments. So what we did was in the day, we worked for a company and we did mobile conversions of their game. And they paid us. And then in the evenings and weekends, we worked on our own game. So what paid. And obviously, you can't do that long term, but it allowed us to get the company off the ground. And that second game was Warhammer Combat Cards, which is a Games Workshop's license. Warhammer.
Yeah, very popular.
Yeah. Well, we'd met them before, and a project had failed to take off. So when we set up on our own, we went back to them and said, "Hey, do you remember us?" But that game did well, and so a publisher came along and said, "Well, we'll buy your studio." And so we've made the studio and sold the studio in about 2 years, which was ridiculous.
That's quick, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was good because the publisher could help us, we could grow, we could learn. But after a point, it's not the studio you set up anymore. You know what I mean? It's
definitely.
You've lost that startup kind of energy. It's all very kind of corporate and so on.
Right.
And it was just too comfortable. It was too easy. I get bored. And if I find, well, personally, I think you need to be a little bit scared at work. Otherwise, you're not pushing. You know what I mean? You want a little bit of that fear of that kind of, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's good. I'm going to go and solve it.
Right, because that's the only way you grow. Otherwise you're just like rinse and repeat. 5 o'clock, yabba dabba do, sliding down the dinosaur tail and punching out, and you're not growing.
And so it was just that decision of, okay, this is too easy, too comfortable. I need to do something scary. Being able to work from home is, it's kind of ridiculous. Because I've done so long in the office, I'm aware of what a kind of not a privilege, but what a kind of opportunity is to be able to go, well, I don't need to commute. I don't need to go into a building. I can set up my stupid little space with all my toys and just stay here, sort of thing.
Right. Get your work done, and probably get more work done because you're not fighting traffic and dealing with that stuff. Like
I travel over to Serbia every couple of months and meet everybody. And we do workshops and stuff, but it seems to be working well.
Right.
As I say, they've got people all over the world now, so they have to be able to cope with remote workers.
So how'd you push through those doubts and concerns? You were just kind of like, all right, this is just too comfortable. I just got to... And how long ago was that? So approaching a year now, about 10 months ago. So, yeah. Oh, okay.
I like to think things through as, you kind of make lists and you weigh things against each other. But underneath all that, it's kind of a level of bullshit you kind of know already. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do this. I need to justify it to my brain, sort of thing.
Yeah. Right.
But you just can't. I think you just kind of work out: can I afford to take? Well, if it goes wrong, am I okay? And if the answer is yes, then go for it. If the answer is no, that's a different decision. Yeah.
One of the things I kind of think about a lot, is rocking chair regret, right? Like, do you want to be 80 or 85 years old sitting in that rocking chair going, I took the easy path. I wish I had done X, right? Like, so like, think about that and don't always take the comfortable path and challenge yourself, because when you're that age, you're screwed. Time's up, right? So
that's true. Don't. It's weird. There are points in my career where I think, if I'd have done this, things would be extremely different now, sort of thing.
Totally.
But it kind of just works itself out. Like, if I hadn't gone to Blitz, I wouldn't have met a friend. He wouldn't have introduced me to his friend, and they introduced me to the woman who's now my wife. That whole life would not be there if you had made different decisions. So you can't really look back and regret things, because it's
And it's always interesting too, right? Because you're like, well, if I'd done this, what about that? And then you can drive yourself crazy, like, second guessing yourself. Like, I could have moved to LA when the TurboGrafx got sold to Hudson Soft and they were trying to grow it there. It's like, but you can't regret it. You just have to make the best decisions, but not be driven by comfort, be driven by challenge and what's interesting. And I think that's the best way to do stuff.
Yeah, I think there are easier careers if you just want an easy life.
Right, because I was like, you want to work, easy career, 9 to 5, whatever, you work in a bank or whatever and stuff like that, but then do you get bored? I used to get burned out of the industry every decade, and I quit in 98 and 2008 and 2014, and you go do corporate stuff for a little bit, and then you're just like, it's boring, I'm not challenged, and then you go back in the industry. So, but yeah, you're right. There's definitely a lot easier careers to have if you just wanted to not have challenges and not have a steadier paycheck and not be concerned about stuff.
I have this kind of weird relationship with the games industry in that it, like, let's be super clear, it's stressful, it's hard, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's just, a nightmare. But I still have this thing of, if it's not a real job, people out there have, they do really hard things to earn a living, and you're like,
right,
make games, it's ridiculous. So, but even though it's often not, it's a job, you get paid because it's difficult or whatever.
Right.
But there are way worse ways to earn a living. So,
yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
You can be 30 stories up, hanging off the side of a building, cleaning windows or something. Right?
Exactly.
So, put it in perspective. So, what's been one of your favorite projects to work on or games?
Yeah. Okay. I find that difficult because, from a design point of view, there's always something that you wish you could have done better. You had more time. That you're like, but that game, other people enjoy it, but you see the flaws, you see the things you never got to do and stuff.
Right.
But as I say, this sort of energy we had when we set up Well Played, and it was make it or die sort of thing. That was really cool. It was fun just to have that, just running as fast as we can sort of thing. And then, like Angry Birds Transformers, we set up a studio. I wasn't in charge of it, but we set up a studio, made that game in the whole thing in 9 months. It was nuts. Building actual desks to get to work on and stuff like this, or designing in a coffee shop because we didn't have an office yet. That sort of scrappiness is always fun. I would say one of the things that was difficult was we spent, as I say, a couple of years on that first-person shooter, the Andy McNabb one for the Xbox.
Yeah.
But it never came out, which is a real shame. And they've just archived it on Games That Weren't, one of those sites that keeps games,
Right.
And if I look back at it now, it's probably hasn't stood up to time. But at the time, it was a fascinating game. I really enjoyed it. It was like a 0 to 4 player game. It had 4 characters, and if you didn't interfere, they would play the game on their own, and then you could just say, "I want to be you," and jump in. And I've still not seen that as a kind of concept. So, that was the hardest one I've lost because you lose a bunch of games over time. They just don't come out for one reason or another.
Right.
And that one was the one that I thought that could have been cool. Could have been interesting and maybe made a splash. But yeah, that's
right.
Hard.
Just to cover it, because I think it's really interesting too. I mean, you've written 3 books now, and you did the first book, which was first-person shooters from 92 to 2002, and then you have another book from, you said 2003 to 2010.
That's right.
First-person shooters.
And we're planning a third one to bring first-person shooters up to now. Basically, I've always loved first-person shooters. As I say, I got into the industry by making Quake levels. So I just played a whole ton of them, and so I just blindly approached a publisher and said, "Hey, can I write you a book?" And there was a lot of back and forth of who the hell are you? But then, they just said go for it, and it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it. It's quite hard to kind of compartmentalize work and the book. You have to go shut down that and think on that, and don't take the book into work in your head.
To work, yeah.
But I got to interview a whole bunch of people and just find out stuff that you think, I can't print that. You said it, but I still can't print it because that's not going in the book, sort of thing. And personal feuds between this person won't be in the book if that person's in the book. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
especially first person, right? Like you get into Romero and all that kind of stuff. That guy's got
there's some big personalities,
Big personality, yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah, I remember seeing him 3 once. I was like, so what was that first book called?
Basically, we called it I'm Too Young to Die, which is the easiest level in Doom, the difficulty. And then the second one is Hurt Me Plenty, which is, we're just going through the sort of difficulty levels. And, the first one's done very well. It's been translated into Polish, Czechoslovakian, Chinese. It's nuts. It's like...
Yeah, it's got beautiful screenshots and stuff. Like I watched a video review of the book, and I was like, wow, I have to pick that up, because it's like, I played a lot of those games back in the day, and I was never good. I was more cannon fodder usually for people, but there's the intensity of it and the fun, especially like Quake 2 and stuff like that. So, I'll have to put those books in the show notes because I think this audience, a lot of people would appreciate it.
Well, Bitmap books, their thing is like these are relatively niche sort of products, so we should really just go for it. Like these aren't casual. People are just going to pick them off the shelf. People want these books, so they really deliver basically in terms of graphics and stuff like that. And so it was interesting because the first book was mostly DOS games, and they're relatively easy to get running and take screenshots of. Whereas as you stray into Windows 95, then the games suddenly got really hard to make them work because modern PCs are like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, exactly.
And
drivers.
Like, what the hell is this?
And the second book comes out May 2, you said, right?
Yeah, no, weirdly, both are on ships. It might be on the same ship for all I know. So
hopefully that ship will get over to where it needs to go. So
exactly. Yeah, that'll be a disaster. And then as I say that, and the video game design book, which is a very different sort of thing that's aimed at, as I say, people who haven't joined the games industry yet or are very new in the games industry, stuff like that.
No, that's great about the book because there's so many misconceptions, and there just needs to be more books like that so people have a better idea of what to do and what not to do and all those kind of things and how to do it. Even though there's so many courses and things out there now, it's still good to have books for people who don't take courses and or want to supplement going to school about game development.
As I say, the courses can teach you skills. That's cool. But there's a lot more that they can't teach you, and that's what you're trying to cover. The kind of, but don't make this mistake. Just, and think about this from the very beginning. Think about your audience and think about your marketing. And if you don't want to think about your audience and your marketing, then you're going to struggle. And here's why. And just exposing people to that, because you see so many people go, "Oh, I made a game and nobody bought it." You're like, yeah, but do they even know it exists?
Right? Yeah. I'd have to look it up, but. The numbers of like games that are released on Steam versus hit some minimal threshold of like 100 reviews or whatever it is, like just a fraction. So it's like, you have to figure out how to market it too, and not as much just put it out and just assume people are going to play it because there's just so much out there.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the topics I tried to cover is, why are you making this game? Like, because if you're making it as a portfolio piece to get into the industry, that's one thing. But if you want to sell it, that's an entirely different thing. Like actual money,
Yeah.
And so be honest with yourself up front about why are you making this game, because then you'll know when you've finished it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Because otherwise it just goes on, and then you start procrastinating, and you're scared of failure to launch. And so if you know at the front why you're making a game, then it makes it much easier to say, okay, this is done now, I should stop.
Right. Yeah. Plus, just not to get personal development stuff, but like Simon Sinek and all that, kind of like know your why, right? Like, so if you know your why, and then when you hitting those speed bumps and procrastinations and everything, you're like, all right, let's think again. Why am I doing this? Okay, this is why I'm doing it, and it gives you energy to kind of get going again and stuff. So what are you curious about right now, the way the industry is changing and everything going on between layoffs and remote and mobile and all these things?
So AI is obviously the big topic in terms of the bigger studios. Like you can understand, like one hand is people are like, well, this is really bad. They're going to get rid of artists or whatever because they can have an AI. But on the other hand, you go, but the AAA industry is broken right now. The number of copies that you need to sell to make back the cost of these games is just unsustainable. So something will have to shift for sure. And then, like we just discussed, anybody can make a game. So now how do you get somebody to see your game and to buy your game? Because, the market is just flooded. So you get that kind of feeling that there will be a tipping point at some point, that we've had these kind of shifts in the games industry where, you had the big crashes, and then Sega's and Nintendo's kind of became monopolies, and then they kind of faded, and whole new audiences come on board, and so there will be another shift. I suspect there has to be really that it can't. The kind of current status quo can't sustain forever. There are just too many things, too many games, too much demands on people's time, and if some people are making a lot of money, that's cool, but just the cost of some of these games is not feasible.
Yeah, sometimes it feels just like an arms war where everyone's just trying to out graphic each other, out link to finish each other, and sometimes you get away with the Elder Scrolls or things like that, whatever. But it just seems like it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I saw it was interesting a long time ago. I saw a study where they were talking about Wii games, and they could put, because that audience was a very casual audience, as we would call them now, they could put more money into graphics and it would not pay off at all, because that audience could not understand or didn't care that these graphics were better than these graphics. They don't care. They just want to play a cool game. Yeah. And so, you see that in the AAA of, this game has all this. You're like, so? That's,
Right. But it gets back to knowing your audience, right? If the graphics were nominally better in Wii Bowling, would have made it that much bigger of a seller? No, right? It was play a game with grandma.
I was just going to say as well, the interesting thing, one of the reasons I joined Two Desperados is they have, can't really go into details and stuff, but that's fine. But they have this kind of, what they're actually thinking about, even though they do mobile free-to-play games, is that audience has now effectively is maturing in that the games that, if you think back to the very earliest mobile games, they were incredibly simple. But these people have been playing games for 10, 15 odd years now.
Right.
So the things that you can do on mobile, because that audience is kind of ready for that, that's where it's interesting. That
a deeper experience,
exactly,
yeah, right.
They're able to accept those because they are games literate. Whereas when we start, it's the same kind of thing I've liked with the consoles, that you could start to experiment because people knew the rules of games, and so you could do stuff, and I think that's what I find interesting about this studio, is that we think that's true of mobile games, so let's experiment with that.
That's nice to hear, because a lot of times it's all just about what's the license, what's the formula, crank it out, throw a bunch of user acquisition money, and then just flood all the time with new content and push notifications to get people to come back and play the game if they're not playing it. But that's cool that they're cognizant and actually focused on that.
Yeah, but I think it will be interesting of how do mobile games develop over time. That will, especially as the kind of the Roblox and the Minecraft kids grow up in, they're going to expect a whole level of better game out of mobile.
So what's a funny or odd story from working in the game industry? I'm sure you have a list of them, but what's one you'd like to share?
We talked about that kind of taking risks or regrets and such earlier, and one of the things that will always stick with me is when I worked at a company that did conversions, we were sent a game and said, do you want to convert this from PC to consoles? And to be fair, at the time, that game it was very extremely early. It was incredibly unfriendly and buggy and looked terrible and didn't play very well. And after I played it a bunch, I recommended that we didn't take that game and do it. That same game turned out to be Dragon Age, the first one. And so it would have possibly been a different, if you would have said yes, that would have been maybe it would have been a nightmare, but it would have been a very interesting project. But it didn't, it wasn't until a lot later you went, wait a minute, okay. And so you get that kind of thing where, like you say, you can't, unless you have a time machine, you can't look back and you can't see these things. So when we did, I've mentioned that Andy McNabb game, and we used him as motion capture, and that was an interesting time with him. Ex-SAS describing the many horrible ways you can kill someone, and I've actually worked with a couple of ex-SAS people over different.
Sorry, what's SAS?
It's the British, the Delta Force of Britain, basically. Special operations. And Andy McNabb he's kind of the famous, but when people leave the SAS, they're supposed to know. He talks about stuff in books, and he got in trouble for it and stuff like that. But so he's kind of a celebrity, or he was a celebrity. You know, this was a while ago.
Yeah.
But him and, I say, Acclaim did a game, and we used some ex-SAS people, and they have this incredibly casual way of talking about horrible things that, as game developer nerds, we were appalling. And stuff like, we went on this weekend-long kind of training thing to get us for one of the games. It was fun. And they had a tear gas grenade, and they said, well, we can throw it in here and people can experience it. And stuff like this is just nuts. I don't know if you would get away with it these days, but I can remember the tear gas cloud coming out of this concrete room where they'd thrown it, and we were supposed to be getting on a coach to go home, and it hit the coach, and the coach driver was just out. And we were like, well, this is amazing. You've just tear gassed a coach driver, and he just turned up at this place. And
so wait, he's like driving some bus to take you back from this training thing, and then the tear gas
he's waiting for
messes him up. Right?
He just rolled straight, and so we had to just stay there for a while because this guy was just couldn't see. And
you don't want your bus driver not be able to see. Yeah, that's a problem.
No, exactly. But, so SAS people share things that you really wish they wouldn't, basically.
Yeah, right.
I don't need to know about this. This is horrible.
Right. And it's like, and then you just, put that other bullet right between their eyes, and then they're dead. Okay, what's for lunch?
You want to shoot people in the nose because it hits the brain stem and stuff like this. You're like, I don't need to know.
Right. Yeah. Don't between the eyes, hit the nose, because then it really takes out the brain. And
you're going, okay,
time for tea?
You live a different world to me, and I'm figured out.
Yeah.
But so that was fun. I say fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. And,
exactly. Yeah.
And those people definitely have to be able to compartmentalize things, between doing this and doing that. So is there a game right now that you're playing that you're excited about? Like anything you're like really stoked?
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me is once you understand how the machine works, it's really hard to play a game and not look at it. Like, why did they do that? I wouldn't, would I have done that? And stuff like that. So it's nice when I find a game that you just kind of get sucked into it. And for me, I'm playing this game Atomfall at the minute. It's a British game, Rebellion. They do the Sniper Elite game.
What platform or platform?
I think it's on PC. It's on Xbox because Microsoft put it on Game Pass. And basically, it's a 1950s British stalker. So an area has been closed off and there's weird stuff in there, and because it's 1950s and British, you get all these guys calling you wankers and stuff like this. It's very it's funny to hear these kind of British accents. And it's just it's enjoyable because it's just very open. It's like, do this, I don't care how you do it, off you go. It just gives you that kind of the stalkers and the cyberpunks, the kind of have fun, off you go, immerse yourself sort of thing. So I'm enjoying that. That's cool. And then playing a bunch of mobile stuff. We're really kind of leaning into narrative in our games at the minute, and so I'm just trying to expose myself to as many sort of story-driven games, just to see how they work and stuff. Getting addicted to ridiculous games like Love and Pies, which is like, this is so not aimed at me, but I can. It's just really well done, and okay, this is cool.
Love and Pies.
Yeah, it's a really. She runs a bakery, and you help her and stuff like this. But it is just driven by its narrative, and it's one of the few games where I'm level 50, and my wife's like level 200, and she's like, "You're such a noob," and she's teaching me stuff, which is nice because she doesn't normally play the same sort of games. And
you're right too. Like when you play games now, you always kind of, because what the sausage is made, you go, I know why that happened, or like,
enjoying Destiny 2 still, but you can just see the seams in it of how they,
right. Or especially like a game when it just has real simple motion graphics in the beginning to tell this elaborate story. You're like, you ran out of money or time or something, because why are these not cutscenes, right? It's just like these real simple motion graphics. Where can people find you online, in terms of websites, socials, things like that?
Yeah, well, as I imagine a lot of people say, I need to be better at this sort of stuff, but I'm still using Twitter, which is this kind of weird place now.
Right.
It's kind of fascinating to watch. It's such a zoo. So
Yeah.
I at main underscore Stuart there, and the promotions and stuff about the books goes on there, and just things that didn't fit in the books I'm just putting in there and stuff like that. Yeah, there's always way more research than you have space for, like,
Yeah. A 1,000-page book, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, 100,000 words, and you still go, now this could be twice this, but it's getting a bit ridiculous now. We just need to stop. But yeah, that's kind of a link on LinkedIn, but everybody does that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd recommend Blue Sky, too, as a good Twitter refugee area. And there's some game dev folks on there, and I've been spending more time on there. And then just the last question, like, what's one piece of advice you'd give others working in the industry right now?
I'd say for me, it's the people, basically. Like, make sure you're working with people that you want to work with, and that you are part of a team that is doing something cool. Because if as I said, there's always another game. So you want to be getting on with games that you're like, we're doing something. This is cool. We are working on something. Mm-hmm. You could be working on what you would say ostensibly better game, but with a team that you don't gel with, or a company you don't like, or whatever. And it's actually, I would always go for the people over the projects, because that's your career, your time, and you just make better games anyway if you enjoy and vibe with the people you're working with.
Like life's too short to work with jerks, right? Like I've done a lot of hiring over the last 7-8 years, and it's always just like, let's just focus on finding smart, talented people with a growth mindset that want to do cool stuff and can work together, and not deal with megamaniacs and assholes, right? So like, and if you find that group, and that kind of speaks to the fact that you've worked, at 4 companies with some of the same people, it works well, and you enjoy their company, and that's optimal, right? That's the dream. Do stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, on one level, it's nice as well because but on the other level, like I say, you just make better games. You trust
that too, right?
Yeah, you know what people can do. You trust that they're doing the right thing, and you're not, like you say, looking over your shoulder at politics and all this sort of stuff.
Stabbing you in the back and all that, that kind of stuff. And then just wrapping up the 2 books. What are the titles again, and when do they come out?
So I've got Hurt Me Plenty, which is the sequel to I'm Too Young to Die. That's at bitmapbooks.com, I think. You can get it on Amazon and such like. And then Designing Video Games, which is a company called White Owl, and they do a bunch of non-fiction and video game books. And again, you can get it on Amazon. If you search for Stuart Maine, you'll see that. And they're both they're both due end of May. So assuming the boat we talked about,
the boat shows up, and
exactly.
Your last name's Maine, like the U.S. state, so that's easy to remember. This has been great. I appreciate a chance to talk about your background and all the cool stuff you've worked on.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to talk games with somebody who's been there, done that, and you see the same things. And
thank you, Stu, and have a great night.
Thanks a lot. Have a good day.